Africa didn't fail because of colonialism alone. It didn't fail because of the Cold War, but it also failed because of some of its own leaders who chose power over people. This is the story we don't like to tell. So, in this video, we are going to paint a picture about African figures whose actions and inactions contributed to the failure of their nations. We are not going to follow the usual trend of blaming the West, and neither are we going to condone their contribution to the current state of Africa. But this video is solely going to focus on the choices of these African leaders, because the successes of other post-colonial countries from the last century has shown that these African countries could have carved the path to positive transformation regardless of Western interferences and internal hardship, just by making the right choices and being united for their emancipation, like most of Southeast Asian countries who rose from their ruins of the World War and colonialism. So let's get into it. We've been told a familiar story that Africa was simply a victim of food war, the leaders had no choice, that foreign powers pulled a lot of strings and they were too powerful. But here is the uncomfortable questions we usually avoid. If that is true, why did some countries who also experienced the same environment, the same factors, rose from their ruins, while the African ones collapsed? When Patrice Lumumba was removed, it marked a turning point in Congo's history. Yes, the CIA had plans. Yes, foreign powers interfered. But here is what we often ignore. Africans were involved. In fact, they were the actors of the scripts that was made by the CIA in Belgium. Local elites, military officers, political rivals. They didn't just follow orders, they made choices. People like Mobutu Sese Seko chose their lust for power over the success and emancipation of their country. He chose to become a local agent of colonialism. Even though he was part of the first independent Congo government as a defense minister, he still lusted for power. And when his colleagues were dreaming of a better Congo and trying to nationalize their natural resources to finance their industrialization and transformation, he was selling them off to the West, just so he could have his fantasy of being a supreme leader. And just like any other Western pawn in history, he gained power through lies and propaganda. And he and his supporters vilified and murdered Lumumba, with America and Belgium pulling the strings. He presented himself as someone who was the forefront of building this strong African identity for Congo, but he failed to build a strong foundation for the new country he inherited. He failed to build dependable infrastructure to support industrializations and strong government institutions to govern the nation into a glorious future. His facade folded like a house of cards when the copper market crashed. And when he was finally exposed as the neo-colonialist he is, he ruled with violence and lived primarily on corruption. Fun fact, he led a complete kleptocratic government, negatively transforming the economy, society and culture of Congo for the worse. He altered Congo to the very core, and the country has never recovered from this. All of this chaos and destruction for a fantasy. Now let's go to Ghana. In Ghana, Nkrumah built one of Africa's most ambitious visions, and then he was overthrown. Yes, there was CIA awareness and support for the coup plotters, but coups don't happen without internal ambitions. These men didn't act because they were forced. They acted because power was within their reach. General Ankara and Kotoka made their ambitions known to the CIA and MI6 years before the coup. They built strong relations with the CIA and the US government years before they even made their move. So much that there are archived memos of directors of the CIA and the State Department of the United States advising state and diplomatic policy toward Ghana in the 1960s, with them factored in. So for you to understand this, let's look at excerpts of these reports. The US was reluctant to negotiate with Nkrumah partly because they foresaw a coup d'etat led by Otu, Ankara and Hali. And not just that, they made sure that all negotiations with Nkrumah were not successful. The only successful thing Nkrumah could get out of negotiations with them was Dakosomo Dam, because they believed and foresaw a coup d'etat. And this is well noted on memos and minutes that are recorded, and right now you can even find for yourself on the Department of State of the United States. So they connived with outsiders to make an environment that will make the life of Ghanaians hard, to set the stage for their coup. For all the propaganda they spread about Nkrumah, they could not even beat it themselves. They said he was a dictator and undemocratic, yet they led a military government. They said he was a terrible president, yet they sold the foundation of their nation to the highest bidders. They sold state-owned assets for cheap and opened the doors for exploitation of Ghana's national resources with minimal compensation. And the state assets that they could not sell, they left to rot away. And just like any power-hungry, illegitimate government, they turned on each other.
The master plan which we have discovered indicates clearly an intention of John junior officers who had planned to assassinate all senior officers to the rank of lieutenant colonel.
Their actions led Ghana down a spiral of coups and counter coups that destabilized the young nation for decades. And somehow there are still people in Ghanaian politics trying to paint these people as heroes. Does this seem like the work of heroes? Or just power-hungry puppets who destroyed Dr. Kwame Nkrumah's Utopia project due to their greed and hunger for power? When we talk about leaders under oppressive systems, there is always an excuse ready. They had no choice. But did they really? Take Kaiser Mantazima in Transkei and Lucas Magopi in Bafuta, Zwana. These were not just administrators trying to survive in a harsh apartheid system. They were heads of so-called independent states created by apartheid South Africa, a system designed to divide, weaken and control the black populations during those hard times for their people. So let's be clear, these independent states within South Africa were not real nations, they were political tools. And yet these men didn't just operate within this system, they enforced it. They suppressed the opposition, they aligned with the apartheid regime, they benefited from the very structure that oppressed their own people, their fellow countrymen. So the question is no longer about constraints of the apartheid system, it's about choice. Because history shows us something uncomfortable. Other nations faced colonialism, other leaders faced pressure, but not all of them chose to become managers of oppression. Look at Singapore, look at China, look at South Korea. Different conditions, yes, but the outcome, transformation, resistance, sovereignty is clear today. So why is it that in Africa we are quick to excuse failure as inevitability? At what point do we stop blaming the system and start questioning the people who chose to uphold it? Because the truth is, apartheid was powerful, the oppression was real, people died, people were scarred for life, but it was not self-sustaining. It needed local enforcers, it needed legitimacy, and men like Mantanzima and Magopu helped provide exactly that. Now let's shift to Nigeria, a country that had everything most post-colonial nations could only dream of. Oil, population, strategic importance. My geographic teacher used to say that if there's one nation in Africa that had the potential to become a global superpower, it was Nigeria, because it was self-sufficient from energy to agriculture to population. Because some of the intelligent people that even I have ever met in my life Most of them were Nigerians. And yet, what did the leadership do with all these resources? Take Yakubu Gowon. He came to power during one of the most critical periods in Nigeria's history, the Nigerian Civil War. To his credit, he kept the country together, but after the war, Nigeria experienced an oil boom, a rare opportunity to rebuild, industrialize, and transform his nation. Instead, what followed was familiar: weak structural reform, rising corruption, a growing dependence on oil wealth rather than diversified growth. Even Gowon himself admitted it, and I quote, "Money is not Nigeria's problem, but how to spend it." And yet, the system never truly changed. Now fast forward to Sani Abacha. If Gowon represents missed opportunity in Nigeria's history, Abacha represents something else entirely: deliberate extraction. Under Abacha, Nigeria didn't just stagnate, it was looted. Billions of dollars in oil revenue disappeared into private accounts across Europe. Political opposition was crushed. The state became a tool not for development but for personal enrichment. This wasn't about colonial constraints. This was about internal choice of the ruling class of Nigeria. So when we talk about why some nations rise and others fall, we cannot ignore this reality. Some leaders were navigating difficult systems, but others were simply feeding off them. A nation does not fail only because of what was done to it, but because of what its leaders chose to do with the power they gained afterwards. Then there is Kenya and its founding leader, Jomo Kenyatta, a very controversial figure in African history. Unlike some leaders in this video, Kenyatta is often remembered as a liberator, a central figure in the struggle against British colonial rule in Kenya. And to be fair, independence under him brought stability. Kenya didn't collapse into chaos. It maintained economic growth and relative order. But here's where the story becomes more complicated. Because independence did not mean transformation for the Kenyan people. The colonial system in Kenya was built on land dispossession, where fertile land was taken and concentrated in the lands of a few. After independence, many expected a radical restructuring to this, but that truly never came. Instead, land and wealth were often redistributed not to the masses, but to a new African elites who were closely tied to the political power of their day. It's almost like the African elites there became their new colonial masters. Critics argue that under Kenyatta, inequality became entrenched, patronage networks expanded, opposition was working to maintain control. So while Kenya avoided the kind of collapse most of the post-colonial countries in Africa faced, it also avoided deeper structural change. Was this pragmatic leadership, as most pro-Kenyatta people like to paint it? Was it about maintaining stability in a fragile new nation? Or was it missed opportunity to fundamentally reshape the society? Because when you look at countries that truly transformed, they didn't just inherit colonial systems like what happened in Kenya after the independence. They dismantled and rebuilt themselves. Independence is not the end of the struggle. It is the beginning of responsibility. And this truly did not happen in Kenya. At this point, it is tempting to treat these as isolated cases. Different countries, different leaders, different histories. But step back, and a larger pattern begins to emerge. Across all 54 states in Africa, you see variations of the same story repeating itself. Not identically, but structurally. In some countries, leadership aligned too closely with external powers, preserving systems that were never designed to empower their people. Like for instance, the main policy of the West after most of African countries gained their independence was to block their path to industrialization as part of the growth of their civilization. And that was truly achieved. So, in other moments when opportunity came for these changes to be done, in moments where resources boomed, post-independence brought unity to the people, where there was strategic advantage, these leaders who sold out didn't take advantage of them. They never converted these opportunities and the power that was given to them into long-term transformation for their countries. In some cases, the state became a tool for extraction, where power meant access to wealth, not responsibility to the citizen. And you can see this especially in Nigeria. The way their politicians present themselves to even their people, the way they flaunt their wealth, the way corruption is so done blatantly is so incredible when you take a look into Nigerian politics. So these political elites just simply inherited their colonial systems and became the new colonial masters. They rebranded themselves and maintained themselves as the new elites of their countries, as replacement of their colonial masters. If we had the resources to do this topic justice, this should have been a 54 hours series on these leaders and these instances, with 1 hour dedicated to each African country. And yet that still won't be enough to break the actions and inactions that led most of our African countries into the ditch they found themselves in. So whether you look at West Africa, East Africa, Central or Southern Africa, you keep running into the same underlying cycle: weak or captured institutions, concentration of power among elites, dependence on raw material export instead of industrialization, short-term survival over long-term strategy. Different leaders, but same outcomes. Now let's be clear, this is not absolute. There are exceptions, there are periods of progress. There are countries that have stabilized, grown, and even improved the lives of their people. Maybe it is not a major transformation like China, but their lives are better than some of the African countries. But even in those cases, the deeper structural transformation, the kind that turns nations into global economic power, remains limited. So the issue is not just colonialism. It is not just foreign interference. It is the repetition of choices. Because systems don't maintain themselves for decades without internal support and internal agents. And across the continent, too often, power has been used to maintain control, secure loyalty, extract wealth, instead of doing the hardest thing of all, rebuilding the system from the ground up to serve the people. When the same outcome repeats across dozens of countries, it stops being a coincidence and it starts becoming a pattern. There is something truly wrong with the political class of Africa. And here is the deeper truth. The system rewards loyalty to power and not loyalty to the people. Foreign powers did not create greed. They exploited it. And some leaders embraced it. There is a popular argument you hear all the time. Africa failed because the conditions were too difficult, because of colonialism, because of global pressure, and many more. But here is the uncomfortable truth. Those conditions were not unique. In the 20th century, dozens of nations were colonized, exploited, and destabilized, yet only a small handful managed to break through. And even after all this, post their independence, foreign powers stayed in their countries militarily or economically. Take Singapore. No natural resources, no land, surrounded by uncertainty. Today, they are one of the biggest and richest economies in the world, one of the most efficient states in the 21st century. Look at South Korea, colonized by Japan, flattened by multiple wars, and now they're a global industrial and technological powerhouse. That's where we get Samsung from. That's where we get some of the best touch screens in the world from. Consider Taiwan, a small island with complex political status, constant external political pressure from China. Yet it dominates one of the most important industries on earth, semiconductors. And the leaders are so smart that they are using this same achievement to buy themselves security from the empire of our age, the United States. Even Hong Kong, a colony with no sovereignty, became a global financial hub. So let's be honest. Colonialism alone does not explain failure. Because if it did, none of these countries should exist as a success story. Yes, systems were stacked against them. Yes, external pressure was real. People died just for them to achieve what they have achieved. But they made strategic choices. They built strong institutions. They enforced discipline. They were united and organized. They industrialized aggressively. And most importantly, they refused to become permanent victims of their history. Now compare that to many post-colonial states in Africa. Weak institutions, elite capture of power, dependence instead of transformation. So the real question is not, was the system unfair? We already know it was. The real question is, why did some nations adapt and rise while others remained exactly where the system wanted them? History creates constraints, but it does not write outcomes. Leadership does. Blaming everything on the West is easy, but it is incomplete, because no empire can destroy a nation without help from within. Africa's future won't be decided in Washington or Beijing, but in the choices its leaders make. So tell me, were these leaders victims, or did they betray their people? Let's have that conversation.